Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show. It is I, your host, the Star Rail Crusader, and today we've got quite the game on our hands. From the minds behind the first Genshin killer, Tower Fantasy, remember that one? Yeah, no one remembers that one. Introducing the latest project from Hoda Studio, Neverness to Everness. Yeah, well, I kinda went into this game with very low expectations when I heard these were the Tower Fantasy devs. My experience from Tower Fantasy was, not very good. Didn't really inspire anything in me, and frankly, a lot of people in the West didn't like it either, from what I remember. Apparently, since the last time we heard of it, the game has suffered from some aggressive power creep and has seen some multiple relaunch attempts within the East. After all, I try to judge devs based on their last game rather than their latest trailer, so when I heard it was Hoda Studio, I wasn't too excited about NTE. To add to that, I also found out about this game around the same time I found out about Ananta, and when you compare those two games, yeah, Ananta did look much better than NTE did, I won't lie. So again, my expectations were pretty simple. This was going to be another gacha game that just burnt out as fast as it came onto the scene. And to be fair, within the first few hours of playing this game, I felt my skepticism was actually justified. The game immediately just comes across as very messy, unfocused, and inconsistent. At least for me, it throws all of these ideas at you without properly grounding any of them, and it feels like it's struggling to figure out what it really wants to be. But as you keep playing, you realize that nothing is falling apart about this game. Against all logic, the game is holding together. In fact, this game has to be one of the most confusingly enjoyable messes I have played in a while, and I'd like to talk about it. But before we dive any deeper into this analysis, please do me the YouTube thing of liking, subscribing, and commenting down below. What are your favorite things about NT and how are you enjoying the game so far? Or not enjoying it, depending on what you're feeling. And with all that said, let's jam. So let's start off with the surface level stuff, and what could be more surface than the visuals, but luckily for you, I like blabbing about visuals. So at first glance, this game actually looks pretty impressive, I won't lie. It has some very strong vistas, dense foliage, solid lighting, the reflections, the skyboxes, the weather. This game looks beautiful when it is wet. And when it's dry. What I mean to say, Unreal Engine 5 is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Because of the engine, they can put in a lot of detail and a lot of lighting. But as good as the visual fidelity is, these anime games are not defined by how detailed they are, but rather the art direction they take. And this is where I think NTE starts to stumble a bit. Don't get me wrong, I love urban, graffiti-heavy street-style aesthetics. It is one of my favorite aesthetics. But when it comes to NTE, a lot of its street style just feels sterile. It feels too clean. It doesn't have texture. It doesn't have grit to it. It feels like NTE isn't giving its own personality towards the graffiti style. It's not adding anything to the aesthetic. And this becomes compounded for me because there is a gacha game out there, a 3D gacha game that's actually done urban graffiti aesthetic and have made it their own. And of course, I'm talking about Zenless Zone Zero, and this game will draw a lot of comparisons to Zenless Zone Zero when it comes to art style. I mean, the urban anomalies are pretty similar to Hollows in concept. The Y2K design language and graffiti stylings of some of the items and some of the loadouts. And even the mascot Tagido looks like a hybrid between a Bangbu and a TV, which are two very important concepts in Zenless. And okay, fine. If we ignore all of that stuff and call it a coincidence, will someone tell me why the UI is almost one-to-one with Zenless? It is blatantly copying here, to the point where I thought that NTE was actually a spin-off of Zenless for some reason. I don't know why that entered my mind, but that is how blatantly copied the UI is. And to me, UI is a great opportunity to express the personality of your game. Ever since Persona 5, I've always thought that UI is such a great way to establish the world and the type of style you're trying to build. See, there's inspiration and then there's imitation, and this game imitates so much to the point that it struggles to stand out. I feel that it lacks its own creative signature, you know? It doesn't have its own source, its own bite, its own grit to it. Again, Zenless has its own little personality quirk. You can see the event banners, you can see the recap banners, you can see the chapter banners have their own artwork to it, and even the style of graffiti it does is very unique to Zenless itself. Here, it doesn't feel like NTE is trying to do something or have its own style. That's what I mean when I say the graffiti feels sterile, it doesn't have texture to it. And halfway through recording the script, I just found out NTE uses a lot of AI assets, so yeah, explains why some things are so soulless. NTE looks stylish on the surface, but it's very shallow underneath. It's like the overall aesthetic of the game has been handed down from other better games rather than them taking the culture and making it into their own. And I think this extends to the character design as well, because the character designs in this game are also pretty meh. Again, it's not horrendous character design, but nothing is memorable. All of these designs, they feel safe, they feel generic, they feel non-committal. It's as if the developers looked at the most popular archetypes they could find in gaming and just copied that. Yeah, this'll work, Shrine Maiden will work, High School Lolly will work, we've seen a Wolfman work before. They take all of these safe archetypes and just make the most straightforward characters for those archetypes. Again, there's no identity, there's no creative twist, there's no special sauce they've put in here that makes you feel, yeah, that's an NTE character design. They don't have that kick to it. You don't love these designs, you don't hate these designs, you just feel okay about these designs. And personally for me, it got worse because I realized there was a lack of visual logic within these characters. And what I mean is that there is a big disconnect between what the character wears and what the character does. For example, let's take Ji-Yuan. She looks like a very high status, very high fashion, well put together individual. You see the broad hat, the high heels, the modern fit, the revolver, and you think, yes, this definitely looks like a schemer, someone who wouldn't get their hands dirty. So what does she actually do in the game? Well, she works for a courier company. Yeah, I get it's an anime game and like people wear weird outfits, but in what world does this look like something a courier would wear, or even a manager of a courier company? It just doesn't have that visual logic to it. And that can apply for the rest of a faction as well, because no one in the company actually looks like a courier. They all look like they either belong to a street kid faction or one-winged biker gang angels. It just doesn't have that congruity to it, you know? And I don't want to make this a endless comparison video because I really hate what they've done with Season 3. But I'd like you to think back to Season 1 and look at the factions there. Every single faction has a visual logic to it. When you look at Victoria Housekeeping Co., they all have that maid butler aesthetic while also having horror movie vibes to all of their designs, and they can have their own distinct personalities while also maintaining the same aesthetic. And the same thing can be applied to almost any other faction in ZZZ, including Belobog Construction, Sons of Kaladin, Cunning Hares, etc, etc. This just doesn't happen here in NTE, and it's a real shame because designs are an opportunity for you to build your world in a clever and subtle way. In NTE, it feels like all these characters are designed after popular archetypes and then they're just shoved into the story whether it makes sense or not. It ends up making the characters feel really shallow. Sure, they're stylish, but they don't really have a purpose and their designs aren't telling a story. They aren't telling the story of the world, they aren't telling the story of the character, and they certainly aren't doing anything to make NTE look unique in terms of character design. And in my opinion, that feels like a pretty big oversight, especially in a gacha game where your main selling point are the characters themselves. Honestly, I would have been more disappointed because I really love designs based in storytelling. However, maybe it's a blessing or a curse, but thankfully, it isn't too big of an issue because the story kinda sucks anyway. If I had to describe the first hour of this game to you in one word, it would be awkward. Yeah, the first hour of this game is rough. In terms of story, it's that very familiar setup of amnesic main character who just wakes up during a catastrophic event, then your MC just uses his OP ability to stop the catastrophe and save the day. Then you have a time skip and all of a sudden they hit you with this huge exposition dump and all of it just doesn't make any sense to you. And yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine. I hate it when gachas hit you with a wall of exposition expecting you to care when I've literally only been in your world for 2 seconds. Give me a character like or some emotional tether. I feel like you can only start investing in the world once you have that tether, and if I don't like any characters, then why would I invest in this world? Maybe it's just the way I like reading stories, but that's what I felt with NTE. And then there's the presentation. I don't know if it's just the sound mixing or if it's poorly directed, but something's very off about the beginning cutscenes. They're just awkwardly paced and the characters are talking at each other rather than with each other, and I personally think this got compounded because of how tonally inconsistent it is. One moment it's serious because there's a terrifying supernatural event that's killing people, and the next it's like super suave and cool because all of the characters are here and they're gonna do some cool stuff. And then it tries to be funny, but everyone has the early 2000s anime humor where they just over-exaggerate almost everything they say with funny effects and over-exaggerated animations. It's so weird. You look at the animations like, wow, that's really good animation work. but then you see the sentences they're saying, and they literally have 15 different animations just to say no. It just ends up feeling like a parody than the personality trait of that anime character. Again, it feels awkward when you're getting into it. And it's not just the presentation and the story, but the gameplay also has this shaky sort of introduction. The way you're narratively introduced to a lot of gameplay mechanics does not make sense. For example, you access the city building by opening a bank account. You can hire some of the characters you own for your restaurant regardless of the jobs they already have in the world itself, like being part of the agency you work for. So you will eventually be able to hire your boss to run a restaurant for you. Yeah, then you can go to jail and still be considered a hero by a lot of the characters in the story. And then you can own apartments, but canonically you still live in a single room dorm behind the agency. So yeah, there's a lot of gameplay systems where they have no narrative consequences. There's a ludonarrative dissonance going on here, where what you do in the game is very different to what the narrative is actually. It's not too big of a deal again, because the main protagonist is a blank slate that lacks any personality or memorable traits. But yeah, you can definitely see they wanted to get to the gameplay as fast as possible, story be damned. And that's why I think the first hour of this game is a bit strange to try and fit yourself into. It's only after you've climbed over that first hour do I think things that were once awkward become the strengths of this world. I think the moment that NTE clicked for me was the first mission you take on with A-Bone and you go to the photography studio. Here, the presentation is immaculate in terms of the horror setting. The way the dark, creepy corridors and the eerie music mixed together really evoke a sense of fear in you. But they also offset it with the anime-style humor I mentioned earlier, making it just absurd when you look at it side by side. They clear out a ghost camera and the A-Bone crew just goes and does JoJo poses after the mission is done. The game starts to embrace this sort of absurdity by blending its anime-style humor with different genres, including horror and action. And because this game's premise is set in the supernatural, things in the story are meant to feel off or weird. So when something like that happens in the gameplay, it actually kind of starts to lend to the narrative. So yeah, all the things that I just spend my time complaining about start to actually become natural to the story, because all the weird stuff is part of the fantasy of this game. This game is about the supernatural and the abnormal, so when you feel that meta feeling of wow, the gameplay feels disconnected, it actually lends to the narrative of NTE. I don't know if the developers were meaning to do this, but it works really well regardless. And this is where I think NTE is at its strongest, when it starts to embrace the chaos of its world. The weirdness starts to feel intentional, and the exaggerated anime style that didn't work in a more serious sort of setting feels right at home here in this chaotic world. Because the world is already so strange, the realism doesn't matter anymore. The chaos becomes part of the appeal. This game is at its best when it stops being serious and starts embracing its chaotic anime nature. As a result, the flaws of this game don't exactly disappear, but they do become much easier to accept. This game invites you to embrace chaos, and once you do, it becomes way more enjoyable. And that enjoyability comes in the form of the open world. Alright, when it comes to NTE's gameplay loop, it can be split into two distinct parts. The first is your typical gacha action side, and the second is the open world sandbox. Now, starting off with the action combat side, it is pretty okay. It's a 4-slot character action system where you collect the characters through gacha. Every character has their own movesets and skills, but ultimately they are limited to usually 2 or 3 buttons. And while some of the characters do have fun kits and the overall combat pace is pretty smooth, it's not doing anything new. There's no combo routes or gameplay systems that actually want to make you engage in the combat. You have no incentive to try and get better or find new ways to play the game. Instead, a lot of it does boil down to your stats. And I imagine the endgame will probably consist of you farming for the best equipment possible to have the highest number possible. It's pretty standard to the point we've seen it in a lot of other gacha games. Honestly, if you're just looking for an action system like this, I'd rather point you in the direction of Wuthering Waves, Zenless, or even Duet Night Abyss. And that brings us to the second part of the gameplay loop, which is the open world sandbox. This is where I think NTE is at its best. It follows a GTA style of progression system, where the basic form of progression is money. The way you show growth in this game is being able to afford better cars, bigger apartments, and other sorts of monetary upgrades for your character. The way you primarily earn money is through the City Tycoon part of the game. This is where you can access a variety of activities. You can go racing, fishing, mahjong, taxi work, delivery stuff, you can play arcade games, you can do restaurant management, you can do city management, and there's a whole host of activities to do even outside of that. All of these mini games eventually earning you money one way or another. And since they all feed into the progression of getting money, none of them feel like a waste of time. But be warned, even though there's a whole host of variety of things to do, none of these are particularly deep. For example, in terms of the racing, sure there's a whole host of cars and difficulties for you to go up and climb the ladder on, but the driving physics of this game feels very stiff. All the cars stick to the road like magnets, and none of them have that sense of inertia. They just hit things and they just stop. It feels very stale to drive these things around. A similar thing can be said for the cafe/city management sim of it. It's simple and has some systems for you to interact with, but it doesn't have any crises or challenges for you to solve as a master business tactician. It's straightforward and pretty simple, and that can be said for all of the activities in this game. None of them are deep individually, but that's not the point. What's the point here is the variety in the design. If I had to give a restaurant analogy, rather than having a high-grade steak or a singular meal, it feels more like a buffet. The experience of you taking different dishes and sampling them. You're constantly switching between the different systems and the different games. This keeps the gameplay feeling fresh and engaging while also giving you that progression because you're earning money through all of these activities regardless of what you do. And since this is a live service game, there's also potential to add even more activities. However, since this is a live service game, there's also a factor that's concerning, and that is the stamina system of the open world. Right now, it's not too bad, as I was able to complete a lot of the content at a comfortable pace, but knowing the studio's history, I can easily see them power creeping the grind and introducing more expensive cars and apartments, making the stamina very limiting in terms of buying actual things you want. They can artificially gate things by keeping the same stamina system but making everything else more expensive, and that can ruin your experience if you just want to sit down and enjoy the world of NTE. But that's just a little nitpick that I had. What I really want to talk about and what really excites me about NTE are the open world supernatural encounters. Man, this game, something about the way the supernatural encounters are designed are so fun to experience. It elevates the 6 out of 10 world into a 7 or 9 out of 10 experience. It is that good. See, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but in other open worlds that are based in cities, there are usually parts of a map that feel dead or empty, right? There'll just be grey walls or an empty space, and there's nothing particularly there for you to do. Those are spots that you usually ignore and you can just move on to the next checkpoint. However, the NTE devs use those spots as an opportunity in order for you to encounter the paranormal. It's in these empty parts of the world that you encounter these warped environments and unique enemies. As soon as you touch it, you're transported into things like an upside down world or a boxing arena. The supernatural becomes front and center, and it is the game at its most exciting. What was once empty and boring parts of the map become the most colorful and trippy parts of it. You want to experience more of this weird stuff, and thus you're compelled to explore more of the city. It's really good design, and I get super excited every time I see it. So overall, my thoughts on the gameplay is that nothing in particular is deep here. All of the systems are pretty average in terms of design. The combat is mid, the activities are simple, but together they create something very, very fun. This is a case where the game is actually more than the sum of its parts. Individually, the systems might not be very fleshed out, but when you put them together and wrap them in the supernatural package of MTE, they give you this very immersive paranormal experience that I definitely think is worth playing. So now that I have all my thoughts out, I can't help but look back and wish this game was a single player experience, because everything I like about it has nothing to do with the live service aspect of it. In fact, if anything, the live service aspects of it are what hold it back. If there was just a solid cast at A-Bone and we didn't focus on all the gacha characters, we could have had a very compelling story and some characters we could really grow to love. If the developers were just given a chance to focus on just the city of Hetero and not worry about content updates, they could have focused on potentially fleshing out the systems even more and making a more compelling gameplay experience. Honestly, I really do like NTE, but it doesn't feel like the type of experience I can play for 10 years. The most alluring part of this game is the open world. So it feels like a very hop-in, hop-out experience where you come back for the new expansion every year. You wouldn't really play this game like your average gacha. Personally, I'm open to that type of experience where you can jump in every year, but you can't really say the same thing about the publishers behind this who would want to see the game make bank like other gachas. We'll have to see how they handle the live service aspect of it, but hopefully it doesn't compromise the fun supernatural aspect of this game. Overall, my final verdict on NTE is that it's pretty messy, it's inconsistent, and can be pretty unfocused at times. But at the same time, it's also ambitious, it's varied, it's an experience I dearly love because of its supernatural aspects. There's so much to do in this game and you're never ever bored. NTE doesn't succeed as a game because it's polished or something, it succeeds because it never lets you get bored. And sometimes that's all you really need to have a fun game. Now, the only question is that enough to survive the brutal live service market? Well, only time will tell. And that is a wrap on the NTE episode. Thank you so much for making it this far. Well, you did make it this far, so might as well like and subscribe, you know? And comment down below. Tell me your thoughts about NTE. Do you enjoy the game? What do you like about it? And what do you think that I am off the mark on? Please comment down below, share the thoughts. I always read them. As for myself, I don't think I'll be playing NTE anymore. Again, for me, it was a very one and done sort of game. I would have preferred this to be a single player experience. There's already too many gacha games in the world, and hell, there's too many games in the world right now. I'm playing Resident Evil Requiem, then there's Lego Batman, and then the James Bond game is coming up, and there's a whole lot of other games coming up, so I simply don't have the time to play NT. It just isn't that kind of experience where I want to keep coming back, because for me personally, I come back to a game if I'm really invested in the universe or the characters, and as I said in the video, I'm not too interested in the universe or the characters. The supernatural stuff is fun, don't get me wrong, but it's not that much of an attraction for me. Plus, there's also Ananta coming out, and you know, we'll have to see how it compares to NT. Maybe it'll be better, maybe it'll be worse, but yeah, for now, I think I'm done with NT. If there's an exciting update in the future, I'll come back. But as it stands, no character or storyline is going to make me come back currently. And with all that said, may your journey lead you ever starward.